The telegram in Grace Gardner's gloved hand trembled as she stood on the platform of the Kansas City train station, watching a tall cowboy with sun-weathered skin and impossibly blue eyes walk toward her through the crowd. And she knew in that instant her carefully planned city life was about to collide with something wild and untamed. It was April 1883, and Grace had just turned 22 years old 3 weeks prior. She had never been this far west before, never been anywhere really except Boston, where she was raised, in Kansas City, where she had moved 6 months ago to take a position as a secretary for the railroad company. The telegram had come from her uncle's lawyer in Dodge City, Kansas, informing her that her uncle had passed and left her his general store. She had no intention of keeping it. She would sell it quickly and return to civilization. The cowboy stopped directly in front of her, removing his worn hat to reveal dark brown hair that fell just past his collar. He was young, perhaps 24 or 25, with a strong jaw and a scar that cut through his left eyebrow. "Miss Gardner." His voice was deep and rough like gravel, but not unkind. "Yes, and you are Vincent Quinn. Your uncle hired me a few years back. I manage the ranch supplies and help with the store sometimes. I am real sorry about your uncle. He was a good man." Vincent's eyes held genuine sorrow, and Grace felt a pang of guilt that she had not known her uncle well enough to mourn him properly. "Thank you, Mr. Quinn. I appreciate you meeting me. I plan to handle the legal matters as quickly as possible and return to Kansas City by the end of the week." Something flickered across Vincent's face, gone too quickly to identify. "That's so. You have not even seen the place yet." "I do not need to see it. My life is in the city. I have a good position, a nice boarding house, friends. Dodge City is not for me." Vincent placed his hat back on his head and reached for her trunk. "Well, the train to Dodge does not leave until tomorrow morning. You will stay at the hotel tonight." "Yes, I have a reservation," he nodded, lifting her heavy trunk as though it weighed nothing. Grace noticed the way his shirt pulled across broad shoulders, the muscles in his forearms visible where his sleeves were rolled up. She looked away quickly, annoyed at herself for noticing. They walked in silence through the bustling station. Kansas City was loud and crowded, filled with the sounds of commerce and progress. Grace loved it here. She loved the theaters, the restaurants, the bookshops. She loved that she could walk down the street and see hundreds of people going about their lives. She loved the electricity that had recently been installed in some buildings, the promise of modernity everywhere she looked. "Your uncle talked about you sometimes," Vincent said as they stepped out into the afternoon sun. "Said you were smart as a whip. Said you could have done anything, but you wanted to make your own way." Grace felt that pang of guilt again, sharper this time. "He said that. He was proud of you, even though you never visited." The words were not accusatory, just factual, but they stung nonetheless. Grace had been busy building her life, proving to her parents that she did not need their money or their society connections. She had not had time for an uncle she barely remembered from childhood. Vincent loaded her trunk onto a wagon and helped her up onto the seat. As they made their way through the city streets, Grace tried to memorize everything. The brick buildings, the paved roads, the fashionably dressed women with their parasols. This was where she belonged. "What is Dodge City like?" she asked, more to fill the silence than from genuine curiosity. Vincent considered the question. "It is different from this, quieter in some ways, louder in others. Still has some rough edges, though it is tamer than it used to be. Your uncle's store is one of the best in town. He built something good there. I am sure whoever buys it will maintain it well." Vincent glanced at her. "You are certain about selling? You have not even seen the books. The store does real well, could provide a good living." "I have a good living. I do not need to run a general store in some dusty frontier town." "Dodge is not that dusty anymore," Vincent said with the hint of a smile. "We got ourselves some real civilization now, even have a newspaper." Grace could not tell if he was joking. "I am sure it is very impressive, but my life is here. I have worked hard to establish myself." They arrived at the hotel and Vincent carried her trunk inside. After she checked in, he stood awkwardly in the lobby, turning his hat in his hands. "The train leaves at 7 in the morning," he said. "I will be here at 6 to help with your trunk." "That is not necessary. I can manage." "Maybe so, but I will be here anyway. Your uncle would have wanted me to see you safely to Dodge." Grace nodded, suddenly tired. "Very well, thank you, Mr. Quinn. Vincent is fine." He put his hat on and tipped it to her. "Good evening, Miss Gardner." She watched him walk away, his boots loud on the hotel's wooden floor. Then she went upstairs to her room, determined not to think about blue eyes and broad shoulders and the way he had spoken about her uncle with such obvious affection. That night, Grace could not sleep. She kept thinking about her uncle, about the general store she had never seen, about the life he had built in a place she had dismissed without a second thought. She thought about Vincent Quinn and wondered what kind of man traveled all the way to Kansas City just to escort someone he had never met to Dodge City. At 5:30 in the morning, she was already dressed and waiting in the lobby when Vincent arrived. He looked surprised to see her ready so early. "You are one of those morning people," he said. "I could not sleep. Too much on my mind." They loaded her trunk and made their way to the train station. The platform was less crowded at this early hour, and the air still held the coolness of night. Vincent bought them both coffee from a vendor, and they stood sipping it in comfortable silence. "Can I ask you something?" Grace said finally. "Sure." "Why did my uncle hire you? What made you want to work in a general store?" Vincent looked into his coffee cup as though the answer might be written there. "I grew up on a ranch about 30 miles outside Dodge. My father raised cattle, and I thought I would do the same. But he died when I was 19, and we lost the ranch paying his debts. I worked as a ranch hand for a while, but your uncle offered me something different. He taught me about business, about dealing with people, about building something that lasts. He gave me a chance when I needed one. I am sorry about your father. It was 6 years ago now. Still miss him, but the hurt is not as sharp." Vincent looked at her. "Your uncle was kind of like a second father to me, I suppose. That is why I wanted to meet you, make sure you got to Dodge safely. It seemed like something he would have wanted." The train whistle blew, and they boarded. Grace had purchased a first-class ticket, but Vincent's was for the regular cars. She felt suddenly uncomfortable with this division, but said nothing as he placed her trunk in her compartment. "I will be in the third car if you need anything," he said. "Wait," Grace heard herself say. "There is plenty of room here. You do not have to sit back there." Vincent hesitated. "Would not be proper. People might talk." "Let them talk. You knew my uncle. We can discuss him and you can tell me about the store. It would be helpful for me to know more before I arrive." He considered this, then nodded and sat down across from her. As the train pulled out of the station, Grace realized she had just invited a cowboy she barely knew to spend the next several hours in her private compartment, and she could not quite understand why she had done it. But as Vincent began talking about her uncle, about the store, about Dodge City, Grace found herself leaning forward, listening intently. He told her about how her uncle had helped establish a school in town, how he had extended credit to families when times were hard, how he had believed that Dodge City could be more than just a rough cattle town. He was real interested in progress, Vincent said. Always talking about how the West was changing, how it needed to change, but he also loved what made it special, the openness, the freedom, the way people could reinvent themselves out here. Is that what you did? Reinvent yourself? Vincent shrugged. Maybe. I went from being a rancher's son to being a businessman, I suppose. Your uncle taught me to read better, to do figures. He had me reading books about commerce and trade. He said education was not just for city folks. Grace felt ashamed of her assumptions about frontier life. That sounds like something my father would say. He is a professor at Harvard. Your uncle mentioned that, said you were raised around books and learning. They talked for hours. Vincent described the landscape they were passing through, pointing out changes as they moved farther west. Grace told him about Boston, about her decision to leave and find her own path. She found herself talking about things she had not discussed with anyone else, about the pressure she had felt in her family's social circle, about wanting to prove she could make her own way. Sounds like you and your uncle had that in common, Vincent observed. He talked about leaving home young, about wanting to build something that was entirely his. I wish I had known him better. You still could have, if you were staying. People in Dodge have stories about him that could fill books. Grace looked out the window at the passing prairie. But I am not staying. I cannot just abandon everything I have built in Kansas City. No one is asking you to. Just saying you might want to see what your uncle built before you dismiss it entirely. There was no judgment in his voice, but Grace felt defensive anyway. I am not dismissing it. I am being practical. I have a life in the city. Vincent nodded and did not push further. They fell into a more neutral conversation about the towns they passed through, the changes the railroad had brought, the way the West was being connected to the rest of the country piece by piece. When they finally arrived in Dodge City around noon, Grace stepped off the train into a wall of dry heat and dust. The town spread out before her, smaller than Kansas City, but more substantial than she had expected. There were brick buildings alongside wooden ones, wide streets, and a surprising number of people moving about their business. Welcome to Dodge City, Kansas, Vincent said, helping her down. Population around 1,000, give or take. We have got law and order now, mostly. The wild days are behind us, for the most part. He loaded her trunk onto another wagon, and they drove into town. Grace tried to keep an open mind as she looked around. There was a bank, a hotel that looked fairly respectable, several saloons, a church with a white steeple, and numerous shops lining Front Street. The railroad tracks ran right through the center of town, dividing it into the north and south sides. Your uncle's store is just up here, Vincent said, pulling the wagon to a stop in front of a well-maintained building with Gardner General Store painted across the front in neat letters. Grace stared at it. Seeing her name on the building made it real in a way it had not been before. This was her inheritance, her responsibility. She climbed down from the wagon and walked to the front door. Vincent unlocked it and pushed it open, and Grace stepped inside. The store was larger than she had expected, with high ceilings and wide aisles. Everything was organized and clean, with shelves stocked with goods ranging from food staples to hardware to fabric and sewing supplies. There was a counter at the back with a cash register and account books neatly arranged. Large windows let in plenty of light. He kept it real nice, Vincent said quietly. Was proud of this place. Grace walked through the aisles, running her hand along the shelves. She could almost feel her uncle's presence here, could imagine him standing behind that counter helping customers, ordering inventory, building relationships with the people of Dodge City. Who has been running it since he passed? She asked. Me, mostly with help from Martha. She is the woman who manages the books and handles the customers when I am dealing with suppliers. Your uncle taught her everything about bookkeeping. She is real good at it. I would like to meet her. She will be here tomorrow morning. She stayed home today knowing you would want to look things over. Your uncle's living quarters are upstairs. That is where you will stay while you are here." Vincent led her up a narrow staircase to a small apartment above the store. It was simple but comfortable, with a sitting room, a bedroom, and a small kitchen. Personal items still filled the space: photographs on the walls, books on the shelves, and a pipe on the table next to an armchair. Grace felt tears prick her eyes. This was too intimate, too personal. She was intruding on her uncle's private life, going through the belongings of a man she should have known but did not. "I will leave you to settle in," Vincent said. "The lawyer's office is just down the street. He is expecting you this afternoon when you are ready. I will be downstairs if you need anything." After he left, Grace sat in her uncle's armchair and let herself cry. She cried for the uncle she had never really known, for the opportunities she had missed, for the complicated tangle of emotions she felt about this place, and the decision she had to make. When she had composed herself, she washed her face and changed into a fresh dress. Then she went downstairs to find Vincent tallying inventory. "I am ready to see the lawyer now," she said. The lawyer's office was just a short walk away. Mr. Abernathy was a round man in his 50s with kind eyes and a gentle manner. He expressed his condolences and then got down to business. "Your uncle's affairs are in order," he explained. "The store is profitable and well established. There are no debts. He also owned a small house that he rented out, which provides additional income. Everything goes to you, along with a sum of money in the bank. You are now a woman of some means, Miss Gardner." Grace looked at the papers spread before her. "How profitable is the store?" Mr. Abernathy showed her the account books. The numbers were better than she had expected, significantly better. The store earned more in a year than she made at her secretarial position. "If you sell, you will likely get a good price," the lawyer continued. "There are several people in town who have expressed interest. Or you could hire someone to manage it for you and take the profits while maintaining your life in Kansas City. Or I could run it myself," Grace heard herself say. Both Mr. Abernathy and Vincent, who had accompanied her, looked at her in surprise. "I thought you were set on returning to the city," Vincent said carefully. I was. I do not know." Grace stood and walked to the window, looking out at Front Street. "I need some time to think about this. It is all happening very fast." "Of course," Mr. Abernathy said. "There is no rush. Take all the time you need to decide." As they walked back to the store, Vincent was quiet. Finally, Grace said, "You think I am foolish. One minute I am determined to leave, the next I am considering staying." "I do not think you are foolish. I think you are overwhelmed, which makes sense given the circumstances. This is a big decision. What would you do? If you were me," Vincent stopped walking and looked at her directly. "I would spend more than a day here before making up my mind. You cannot know a place in just a few hours. You cannot know what kind of life you could have here without giving it a chance. But my position in Kansas City, my friends, everything I have built there, will still be there if you decide to go back. But you cannot get this time back. You cannot get to know your uncle once you have sold off everything he worked for and returned to the city." Vincent's voice was passionate now. "I am not saying you should stay. I am saying you should really see what you would be leaving behind before you make that choice." Grace considered this. "How long would you suggest?" "A month. Give it a month. Let Martha teach you the books. Let me show you how we handle suppliers and inventory. Meet the customers, learn about the town. Then decide." "A month," Grace repeated. "That is a long time. It is also a short time in the span of a life. 1 month to understand your inheritance before you sell it off. That does not seem unreasonable." He was right, and Grace knew it. She nodded slowly. 1 month, but I am not promising anything beyond that." Vincent's smile was slow and warm. Fair enough. That evening, Vincent invited Grace to dinner at the hotel restaurant. It was the nicest place to eat in Dodge City, he explained, and he wanted to make sure she understood that the town was not all dust and cattle anymore. The restaurant was indeed nicer than Grace had expected. The tables had white cloths, the waiters wore proper uniforms, and the food, when it arrived, was excellent. Over roast beef and potatoes, Vincent told her more about Dodge City's history. It got real wild here in the 70s, he said. This was a cow town, a place where drovers brought cattle up from Texas. There was a lot of drinking, gambling, fighting, but the town has grown up since then. We have got proper law now, schools, churches. Families are putting down roots. You have family here? Grace asked. Besides your ranch background, you have not mentioned anyone. My mother moved to Denver after we lost the ranch. She is living with my sister there. I have a brother in Texas working a ranch. I see them when I can, but Dodge is home for me now. Do you miss ranching? Sometimes. But your uncle taught me that there are different ways to make a living, different ways to build a life. I like what I do now. I like meeting people, solving problems, keeping things running smoothly. Grace found herself watching the way Vincent's face animated when he talked about the store, about Dodge City. He had found a place where he belonged, a purpose that fulfilled him. She envied that certainty. After dinner, they walked back to the store under a sky filled with more stars than Grace had ever seen in the city. The air had cooled significantly, and she wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders. The stars are incredible out here, she said, tilting her head back. That is one thing the city cannot give you. Out here on a clear night you can see forever. They stopped in front of the store, and Vincent pulled out his pocket watch to check the time. I should let you get some rest. Tomorrow will be busy. Martha will want to go through everything with you, and I thought I could show you how we handle orders and suppliers. Vincent, Grace said, and he looked at her. Thank you for meeting me in Kansas City, for helping me understand what my uncle built here. You did not have to do all this. Your uncle did a lot for me. This is the least I can do for him, making sure his niece knows what she is inheriting. After he left, Grace went upstairs and sat by the window, looking out at the quiet street. Dodge City at night was peaceful in a way Kansas City never was. There was no constant noise, no crowds, no clatter of carriages on cobblestones. Just the occasional sound of a piano from one of the saloons, the distant bark of a dog, the whisper of wind through the eaves. She thought about Vincent's suggestion to give the town a month. A month was nothing, really. Her position at the railroad would be filled by someone else if she did not return, but she could always find another secretarial job. Her friends would miss her, but friendships could survive a month apart. What scared her was not the month itself. What scared her was the possibility that she might not want to leave after the month was over. The next morning, Grace woke early and dressed carefully in her most businesslike outfit. She was nervous about meeting Martha and learning to run the store. What if she was terrible at it? What if everyone could tell she was just a city girl playing at being a frontier businesswoman? Martha arrived at 8 o'clock sharp. She was a woman in her 40s with graying hair pulled back in a practical bun and intelligent eyes that assessed Grace thoroughly. So you are the niece, Martha said. Your uncle talked about you. I am sorry I did not visit him more. I did not realize. No use dwelling on what is done. Question is what you are going to do now. Martha set her handbag behind the counter and pulled out the account books. Vincent says you are staying for a month to learn the business. That true? Yes. I want to understand what my uncle built before I make any decisions. Martha nodded approvingly. Smart. Now come here and let me show you how we keep the books. Your uncle had a good system, and I have been maintaining it since he took ill. For the next several hours, Martha walked Grace through every aspect of the store's finances. She explained the credit system they used with local ranchers and farmers, showed her how they tracked inventory, taught her about profit margins and reordering schedules. Grace had always been good with numbers, and she found herself fascinated by the complexity of it all. "You are catching on quick," Martha said approvingly. "Your uncle said you were smart. He was right." Around noon, customers started arriving. Martha handled them with practiced ease, calling people by name, asking about their families, offering suggestions for items they might need. Grace watched and learned, seeing how the store was not just a place of business but a social hub, a place where people connected and shared news. One woman came in with her 2 children, looking for fabric to make new shirts. Martha showed her several options, discussed prices, and when the woman hesitated, offered to put it on account. "Tom will settle up when he sells the cattle next month," Martha said. "We know you are good for it." After the woman left, Grace asked, "How do you know they will pay?" "Because your uncle built this business on trust and relationships. He knew that most folks are honest, and if you treat them right, they will treat you right back. Sure, we have been burned a time or two, but mostly it works out. And the goodwill is worth more than the occasional loss." Vincent came in around 2 o'clock, dusty from a trip out to one of the nearby ranches to deliver supplies. He had taken on some of the delivery work since her uncle's death, explaining that it kept the customers happy and brought in extra income. "How is the first day going?" he asked Grace. "My head is spinning with information, but I think I am starting to understand how it all works. Martha is the best teacher you could have. She knows this business inside and out." Martha waved away the compliment. "I only know what your uncle taught me. He was the real genius behind this operation." Over the next several days, Grace fell into a routine. She spent mornings with Martha learning the books and the customers. Afternoons were often spent with Vincent, learning about inventory management, supplier relationships, and the logistics of running a frontier store. Evenings, she spent going through her uncle's personal papers and books, getting to know him through his belongings. She also began exploring Dodge City. The town was smaller than Kansas City, certainly, but it had its own charm. She visited the schoolhouse and met the teacher, a young woman from Ohio who was passionate about education. She attended a church service and was welcomed warmly by the congregation. She browsed the other shops on Front Street and met other business owners who had known her uncle well. Everyone had stories about him. How he had extended credit to a family going through hard times. How he had donated supplies to the school. How he had helped settle disputes and always had a fair word for everyone. Grace felt pride mixing with her regret at not knowing him better. On her 5th evening in Dodge City, Vincent knocked on her door at sunset. "Come with me," he said. "There is something I want to show you." Grace grabbed her shawl and followed him down to the wagon. They drove out of town, heading west into open prairie. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold and pink. "Where are we going?" Grace asked. "You will see." They drove for about 20 minutes until they reached a small rise overlooking miles of open grassland. Vincent stopped the wagon and helped Grace down. The view was breathtaking. The sun was setting in a blaze of color, and the prairie stretched out endlessly in every direction. "This was your uncle's favorite spot," Vincent said quietly. "He brought me here when I first started working for him. Said that whenever Dodge City felt too small or his problems felt too big, he would come out here and watch the sunset. It reminded him why he loved this place." Grace turned slowly, taking it all in. The vastness of it, the openness, the way the light turned the grass to gold. There was something deeply moving about it, something that spoke to a part of her she had not known existed. "It is beautiful," she whispered. Your uncle said that out here, a person can see possibilities. The land goes on forever, and you can imagine anything you want for your life. That is what the West is really about. Not the wildness and the danger, but the possibility. The chance to build something entirely your own. They stood in silence as the sun sank lower, the colors deepening and shifting. Grace felt something shift inside her too, some tightly held belief beginning to loosen. "I told him I would never leave the city," she said suddenly. "When I was younger, before I moved to Kansas City, my uncle wrote me letters. He invited me to visit, told me about Dodge City and his store. I wrote back saying I could never live anywhere but a city, that I needed culture and society and all the things a city could provide. I was so sure of myself. What do you think now?" Grace considered the question, watching the sun touch the horizon. "I think maybe I did not know what I was talking about. I think maybe there are different kinds of richness in life, different kinds of culture and society." Vincent looked at her, and in the fading light his eyes were very blue. "Does that mean you are thinking of staying? Beyond the month, I mean." "I do not know. I am not sure what I am thinking anymore. Everything I was so certain about feels less solid now. For what it is worth, I think you belong here. I have seen you this past week, how quick you learn, how good you are with the customers. You have got a gift for this, Grace, and people like you. You could build something real good here." Grace's heart was beating faster. "And what if I fail? What if I sell everything in Kansas City, commit to staying, and then discover I am terrible at running a store? Then you will learn and get better. Or you will sell the store and try something else. But at least you will know. At least you will have tried." The sun disappeared below the horizon, leaving behind streaks of purple and deep blue. Stars were beginning to appear, and the air was growing cool. Vincent built a small fire to ward off the chill, and they sat on a blanket he had brought in the wagon. "Tell me about your life in Kansas City," Vincent said. "What do you love about it? What would you miss?" Grace thought about it. "I love the theaters, the concerts. I love being able to walk to a bookshop whenever I want and find the latest novels. I love the restaurants with food from all over the world. I love the feeling of being in the middle of things, where news happens and progress is being made every day. Those are good things to love. What else? I love my independence. I love having my own money, my own apartment at the boarding house, my own life that I built without my parents' help or my family's connections. I love knowing I did it on my own." Vincent nodded. "Your uncle was the same way. That is why he came west in the first place. He wanted to build something that was entirely his own achievement. Did he ever regret it, leaving everything behind? Not that he told me. He used to say that the hardest decisions are often the most important ones. That if something is worth having, it is worth being scared about losing everything else to get it." They talked for hours as the fire burned down. Vincent told her about growing up on the ranch, about the hard work and the freedom of it. About losing his father and the ranch, and feeling like he had lost his identity too. About how her uncle had given him a new purpose, and taught him that he could be more than just a rancher's son. Grace told him about growing up in Boston society, about the suffocating expectations and the pressure to marry well and be a proper society lady. About how she had fought with her parents to let her make her own way, and how hard it had been to prove she could support herself. "It sounds like we both have been running from something," Vincent observed. "You from your family's expectations, me from being just another cowhand with no prospects. Maybe, or maybe we have been running toward something, toward the people we really want to be." Vincent smiled at that. "I like that better. Running towards something instead of away." When they finally returned to town, it was late. Vincent walked Grace to the door of the store, and they stood there awkwardly for a moment. "Thank you for showing me my uncle's place," Grace said. I understand better now why he loved it here. He would have liked knowing you saw it. He always hoped you would visit, see what he had built. Grace felt tears prick her eyes again. I wish I had. I wish I had not been so stubborn and sure I knew better. Hey, Vincent said gently, and before she knew what was happening, he had pulled her into a hug. She stood stiffly for a moment, then relaxed into it, letting herself be comforted. He was solid and warm, and he smelled like leather and smoke and prairie grass. When they pulled apart, Grace felt her cheeks flush. I should go inside. Tomorrow is Sunday, and Martha invited me to church with her family. That is nice. Church is a good way to meet more people. Vincent hesitated, then said, Would you like to have dinner with me tomorrow evening? There is a place on the north side that makes good steaks. Are you asking me on a proper dinner outing, Mr. Quinn? I suppose I am, Miss Gardner. Grace felt a flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the way Vincent was looking at her. Then I suppose I accept. His smile was bright enough to rival the stars overhead. Good. I will pick you up at 6. That night, Grace lay in bed unable to sleep again, but for different reasons than before. She kept thinking about Vincent, about the way he had looked at her by firelight, about the feeling of being in his arms. She barely knew him, had only met him less than a week ago. But there was something between them, some connection that felt both new and ancient at the same time. She was being ridiculous, she told herself. She was not staying in Dodge City. She was just here for a month to learn about her uncle's business. Getting involved with Vincent would be foolish and complicated, but even as she thought this, she knew it was already too late. She was already involved, already feeling things that scared and excited her in equal measure. Sunday church was interesting. The congregation was smaller than what Grace was used to in the city, but the people were friendly and welcoming. They sang hymns with genuine feeling. And the preacher gave a sermon about building community and helping one's neighbors that felt more relevant than many of the formal church services she had attended in Boston. After church, Martha introduced Grace to several families, and she found herself invited to a social gathering the following week and asked to join a women's book club. The sense of community was strong here in a way it had never been in Kansas City, where people came and went, and no one seemed to really know their neighbors. That evening, Vincent arrived promptly at 6, cleaned up and wearing a pressed shirt. He had shaved and combed his hair, and Grace felt that flutter in her stomach again. The restaurant was small but clean, with checkered tablecloths and the smell of cooking meat in the air. They ordered steaks and potatoes, and over dinner, their conversation flowed easily. They talked about books, about politics, about their hopes for the future. What do you want, Vincent? Grace asked. If you could have anything, what would your life look like? He thought about it, cutting his steak carefully. I want what your uncle had, I think. A good business, a place in the community, respect. Maybe a family someday, children to teach things to. A house of my own instead of renting rooms above the livery. Nothing fancy, just solid and real and mine. That does not sound like too much to ask. What about you? What does Grace Gardner want? I thought I knew. I wanted independence and success on my own terms. I wanted to prove I did not need my family's money or connections. I wanted to be my own person. She paused. But being here, learning about my uncle's life, it has made me wonder if I was so busy proving what I did not need that I never stopped to think about what I actually wanted. And what do you want, now that you are thinking about it? Grace met his eyes across the table. I am not entirely sure yet, but I think I am starting to figure it out. After dinner, they walked through town. The evening was pleasant, and Front Street was busy with people enjoying the mild weather. Vincent pointed out various buildings and told her stories about the town's history. They ended up back at the rise overlooking the prairie, watching another sunset. This time, when Vincent took her hand, Grace did not pull away. They sat close together as the sun painted the sky, and Grace felt something settle inside her, some peace clicking into place. "I am glad you came to Dodge City," Vincent said quietly. "Even if you end up leaving, I am glad I got to know you." "I am glad too," Grace admitted. "This is not at all what I expected." "What did you expect? Dust and danger and rough men and rougher living. I expected to hate it here." "And do you?" "Hate it?" Grace turned to look at him, this man who had appeared in her life just over a week ago and had somehow become so important so quickly. "No, I do not hate it at all." Vincent leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away, but Grace did not want to pull away. She wanted this, wanted to know what it would feel like to kiss him. Their lips met softly at first, tentatively, and then with more confidence. Grace felt heat rush through her body, felt her heart race. This was not the polite kisses she had exchanged with the few men her parents had pushed her toward in Boston. This was something entirely different, something real and passionate and a little bit wild. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "I probably should not have done that." "Why not?" "Because you are leaving. Because this just makes everything more complicated." "Maybe I want complicated," Grace whispered. "Maybe I am tired of simple and safe and predictable." They kissed again, and this time Grace let herself fall into it completely. She had spent so much of her life being careful, being proper, doing what was expected. This was not careful or proper or expected. This was messy and uncertain and absolutely terrifying. It was also the most alive she had felt in years. Over the next 2 weeks, Grace fell into a pattern. Days were spent learning the store business, and she discovered she was actually good at it. She had a head for numbers and organization, and she was surprisingly good with customers. People seemed to like her directness and her genuine interest in their lives. Evenings were often spent with Vincent. They had dinner together, took long walks, drove out to watch the sunset. They talked about everything and nothing. Grace told him things she had never told anyone else, about her fears and dreams and doubts. Vincent opened up too, sharing his own struggles with losing his family's ranch, with finding a new identity, with wanting to build a life that mattered. They kissed often, long, passionate kisses that left them both breathless and wanting more. But Vincent was always respectful, always stopping before things went too far. Grace appreciated this even as part of her wanted to throw caution to the wind entirely. "I do not want to dishonor you," Vincent said one night when they were parked under the stars, both of them flushed and frustrated. "I care about you too much for that." "I care about you too," Grace admitted. "That is what scares me. This was supposed to be simple. Come to Dodge, settle the estate, return to my life, but you have made it so complicated." "I have not done anything you did not want me to do, I know. That is the problem. I want this, I want you, but I do not know how to make this work. My life is in Kansas City, or it was. Now I do not know where my life is anymore." Vincent took her hand. "You still have 2 weeks left in your month. Let's just see what happens. No pressure, no expectations, just see where this goes." But of course there was pressure and expectations. Grace could feel time running out. Her month would end soon, and she would have to make a decision. Stay in Dodge City and run her uncle's store, build a life here with Vincent. Or return to Kansas City, and the life she had worked so hard to create, leaving behind this place and this man who had come to mean so much. The decision weighed on her constantly. She made lists of pros and cons. She wrote letters to friends in Kansas City, feeling out whether there was truly anything pulling her back there. She lay awake at night thinking about what her uncle would have wanted, what her parents would think, what she truly wanted for herself. Martha noticed her distraction. "You are falling for him," she said one afternoon when they were doing inventory and Grace had counted the same box of soap 3 times. Is it that obvious? To anyone with eyes. And he is falling for you too. Probably already has fallen. I have never seen Vincent Quinn look at anyone the way he looks at you. That just makes this harder. If this was just about the store, the decision would be easier, but it is not just about the store anymore. Martha set down her clipboard and looked at Grace seriously. Can I tell you something? Your uncle always regretted that he never married, never had children. He built a good life here, a successful business, but he was lonely. He told me once that he wished he had taken more chances on people instead of just on business ventures. What are you saying? I am saying that a good business is worth something, but it is not worth everything. Love matters too. Connection matters. And if you have found that with Vincent, you should think real hard before you walk away from it. Grace felt tears prick her eyes. But what if I stay and it does not work out? What if I give up everything in Kansas City, and then this thing with Vincent falls apart? Or what if I am terrible at running the store and lose everything my uncle built? What if you leave and spend the rest of your life wondering what might have been? What if you play it safe and miss out on something extraordinary? Martha put a hand on Grace's shoulder. There are no guarantees in life, honey. All you can do is listen to your heart and be brave enough to follow it. That night, Grace sat at her uncle's desk and wrote him a letter, even though he would never read it. She told him about the store and how much she had learned. She told him about the town and the people who had welcomed her. She told him about Vincent and how confused she felt. She told him she wished she had known him better, wished she had visited, wished she could ask him what to do. When she finished writing, she felt lighter somehow. And she realized that she already knew what her uncle would say. He had come west to take a chance, to build something of his own. He had chosen possibility over security, adventure over comfort, and he had never regretted it. The next morning, Grace woke with a sense of clarity she had not felt before. She dressed quickly and went downstairs to find Vincent already in the store, unpacking a shipment of goods. "Vincent, I need to talk to you." He looked up, concern crossing his face at her serious tone. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong. But my month is almost up, and we need to talk about what happens next." Vincent set down the box he was holding and came to her. "Okay, what are you thinking?" "I am thinking that I am terrified. I am thinking that everything in my life has been leading me in one direction, and now I am considering going in a completely different direction, and that is scary." "I understand that. What else are you thinking?" Grace took a breath. "I am thinking that I want to stay. I want to keep the store and learn to run it properly. I want to be part of this community. I want to see where this thing between us goes. But I am scared I am making this decision for the wrong reasons. I do not want to stay just because of you, and then have you feel responsible for my happiness." Vincent took both her hands in his. "Grace, you have to make this decision for yourself. I would love for you to stay, but not if you are going to resent being here. Not if you are going to always wonder what you gave up. I know. That is why I have been thinking about this so carefully." Grace squeezed his hands. "And I realize that I am not giving up anything that really matters. I am trading one kind of life for another, yes. But the life I am trading for has you in it, and this store and this community. It has possibility and purpose." The life in Kansas City was safe and predictable, but it was not really fulfilling. I was just going through the motions, proving a point to my parents that I did not need them. And now I want to build something real. Something of my own, yes, but also something connected to this place and these people. Does that make sense? Vincent's smile was like the sun coming out. "It makes perfect sense. So you are staying." "I am staying. At least for now I am staying. We can take things slow, see how it goes. But yes, I am staying." Vincent let out a whoop and picked her up, spinning her around. Grace laughed, clutching his shoulders, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. When he set her down, they were both grinning like fools. "I need to write to Kansas City. Let them know I will not be returning to my position," Grace said. "And I need to arrange for my things to be shipped here. And I need to learn so much more about running the store properly." "We will figure it all out together," Vincent promised. "You are not in this alone." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Grace wrote letters, arranged for her belongings to be shipped from Kansas City, and threw herself into learning every aspect of the store business. Martha was a patient teacher, and Vincent helped her understand the supplier relationships and inventory management. Grace also began making connections in the community. She joined the Women's Book Club and found that she enjoyed discussing literature with women from different backgrounds than she was used to. She attended town meetings and learned about the issues facing Dodge City. She helped organize a fundraiser for the school and discovered she had a talent for bringing people together. Vincent courted her properly, with Sunday dinners at the hotel and evening walks and stolen kisses when Martha was not looking. He introduced her to his friends, and she introduced him to the women from her book club. They became a known couple in town, and Grace found she did not mind the attention. One evening, about 2 months after Grace had decided to stay, Vincent drove her out to their special spot overlooking the prairie. The sunset was particularly spectacular, with clouds catching the light and turning shades of orange and pink and gold. "I have something to ask you," Vincent said, and Grace's heart started beating faster. "All right. I know we have only known each other a few months. I know that is not very long in the grand scheme of things. But Grace, I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. You are smart and brave and funny. You took a chance on this place, on this life, and you have made it your own. You have made yourself a part of this community in a way that amazes me." "Vincent, let me finish. I am not good with fancy words. I am just a cowboy who got lucky enough to learn a trade and build a life. But I know what I want, and I want you. I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep next to you every night. I want to run that store with you and raise children with you and grow old with you." Vincent got down on one knee, and Grace's hands flew to her mouth. He pulled out a small box and opened it to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond. "Grace Gardner, will you marry me?" Grace felt tears streaming down her face. "Yes, yes, of course yes." Vincent slipped the ring on her finger and stood, pulling her into his arms. They kissed as the sun set behind them, and Grace felt like her life was finally beginning. All the years in Boston and Kansas City had been preparation, building toward this moment, this choice, this man. "I love you," she whispered against his lips. "I love you too. I think I have loved you since I saw you standing on that train platform, looking so determined and so lost at the same time." They stayed until full dark, making plans and dreaming about their future together. They would live in the apartment above the store at first, then build a house on a piece of land outside town. They would expand the store, maybe open a second location. They would have children and teach them about business and community and taking chances on life. The wedding took place 2 months later, in October 1883. It was a simple ceremony at the church, with Martha standing up for Grace and one of Vincent's rancher friends standing up for him. The whole town seemed to turn out for the celebration afterward, with food and music and dancing in the street. Grace wore a cream-colored dress that she had bought from the dressmaker in town, and Vincent wore a new suit. They said their vows with voices strong and sure, promising to love and honor each other for the rest of their lives. At the reception, several people made toasts. Martha talked about how Grace had come to town as a city girl determined to leave and had become a true part of Dodge City. One of the town council members talked about how the Gardner General Store remained a vital part of the community under new ownership. Vincent's mother, who had traveled from Denver with his sister, talked about how happy she was to see her son so clearly in love. When it was time for the first dance, Vincent led Grace onto the makeshift dance floor as someone played fiddle. He held her close as they swayed to the music, and Grace felt overwhelmed with happiness. "Having regrets yet?" Vincent teased. "Not even one. You." "My only regret is that I did not meet you sooner." "Well, I had to grow up and become my own person first. If we had met when I was younger, I probably would have been too stubborn to see what was right in front of me. Then I guess the timing was perfect after all." They danced until late, surrounded by friends and community. When the party finally wound down, Vincent swept Grace up in his arms and carried her up the stairs to their apartment, now decorated with flowers and candles by Martha and some of the other women. That night, as they lay together as husband and wife for the first time, Grace thought about how much her life had changed in just a few months. She had come to Dodge City planning to spend a week, sell her inheritance, and return to her comfortable city life. Instead, she had found a home, a purpose, a community, and a love deeper than she had imagined possible. "Thank you," she whispered to Vincent in the darkness. "For what?" "For meeting me at that train station, for showing me my uncle's place, for asking me to give Dodge City a chance, for loving me." Vincent pulled her closer. "You gave all those things to yourself by being brave enough to stay. I just provided the opportunity." "I was thinking about what you said that first day, about how you told me to come with you for one sunset. That is what changed everything. If you had not taken me to see that view, to understand what my uncle loved about this place, I might have left without giving it a real chance. I am glad you came to see that sunset, and all the ones after." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, content and happy and full of hope for the future. The years that followed were good ones. Grace thrived as a businesswoman, expanding the store and building strong relationships with suppliers and customers. She became known for her fair dealing and her willingness to extend credit to families in need, just as her uncle had done. Vincent handled much of the physical work and deliveries, and together they made a formidable team. They built a house just outside town, a simple but sturdy structure with a wide porch and enough land for a garden and some chickens. Grace planted flowers and vegetables, discovering she enjoyed working with the earth in a way she never would have expected in her city days. Their first child, a son they named Victor after Grace's uncle, was born in August 1885. Grace had been nervous about childbirth, but she had Martha and Vincent with her, along with the town doctor, and everything went smoothly. Holding her son for the first time, Grace felt a completeness she had not known she was missing. 2 years later, they had a daughter they named Margaret after Vincent's mother. And 2 years after that, another son they named William. The house that had seemed so spacious became cramped and noisy and full of life. Grace loved being a mother, though it was harder than she had imagined. She had help from Martha and some of the other women in town, and Vincent was an involved father, taking the children on deliveries with him and teaching them about the business from an early age. The store continued to prosper. Grace introduced some new practices, including a small lending library in one corner where people could borrow books for free. She also started stocking more goods aimed at women, including ready-made clothing and household items that saved time and labor. Vincent expanded the delivery service, eventually hiring 2 young men to help with the growing demand. Dodge City grew and changed around them. The wild days became more and more distant history as families settled and stayed. More schools were built, more churches, more businesses. The railroad brought in more goods and more people. Dodge City was becoming a real town, no longer just a stopping point on the cattle trails. Grace stayed in touch with some of her friends from Kansas City, exchanging letters, and even hosting a visit from one of them who was curious about frontier life. Her friend was impressed by what Grace had built, by the life she had created. "I thought you would be miserable out here," her friend admitted. "I thought you would realize quickly that you had made a mistake and come back to civilization." "I did come back to civilization," Grace said with a smile. "I just had to travel west to find it. This place is every bit as civilized as Kansas City, just in different ways. We have schools and churches and society. We have culture and community. It is just more personal here, more connected." She also reconciled with her parents, who came to visit when Victor was 2 years old. They were surprised by what they found in Dodge City, by the life Grace had built. Her father spent hours talking with Vincent about the business, impressed by the operation they had created. Her mother was charmed by the town and the people, and she doted on her grandson. "I owe you an apology," her father said before they left. "I thought you were making a mistake, leaving Boston, refusing our help, going off on your own. But you have built something remarkable here. You and Vincent both. I am proud of you." Those words meant more to Grace than she would have expected. She had thought she did not need her parents' approval, but it turned out that having it was satisfying after all. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Vincent took Grace back to the rise overlooking the prairie where he had proposed. The children were staying with Martha for the evening, and they had the whole night to themselves. 10 years, Grace said, leaning against Vincent as they watched the sunset. "Can you believe it has been 10 years? Best 10 years of my life, and it keeps getting better. I was thinking about that first sunset you brought me to see. Do you remember? I had told you I would never leave the city, that I could not imagine living anywhere else. And I asked you to come with me for one sunset. Just one, to see what you would be missing if you left without giving this place a chance. That one sunset changed my entire life. If I had said no, if I had been too stubborn or too scared, I would have missed out on all of this. On you, on our children, on this life we have built together." Vincent kissed the top of her head. "I am glad you said yes. I am glad you were brave enough to take a chance. Me too. Every single day I am grateful that I took that chance. This life is so much richer and fuller than anything I could have had in the city. Not because the city is bad, but because this is where I belong. This is where my heart is." They watched the sun sink below the horizon, painting the sky in familiar shades of gold and pink and orange. The prairie stretched out endlessly before them, full of possibility and promise, just as it had been all those years ago. As darkness fell and the stars came out, Vincent and Grace sat close together, counting their blessings and planning their future. They talked about expanding the store again, about Victor starting school, about teaching Margaret to read. They talked about dreams and hopes and all the years still to come. "I love you, Grace Quinn," Vincent said. "I love you too. More than I ever knew it was possible to love someone." They stayed until late, reluctant to leave this place that held so many memories, this spot where their life together had really begun. When they finally drove back to town, Grace looked up at the star-filled sky and thought about her uncle, hoping he knew that his store was in good hands, that his legacy lived on. The years continued to pass in a blur of busy days and quiet evenings. The children grew and thrived. Victor showed an aptitude for business and numbers, clearly destined to take over the store someday. Margaret loved books and learning, and Grace nurtured this interest, making sure her daughter had access to education and opportunities. William was the wild one, always getting into trouble, reminding Grace of what Vincent must have been like as a child. Grace and Vincent grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They weathered hard times, including a drought that hit the region hard and several families who could not pay their accounts. They celebrated good times, including bumper crop years and the expansion of the railroad that brought even more business to Dodge City. Martha eventually retired, though she still came by the store regularly to visit and offer advice. Grace hired 2 young women to help with the books and the customers, teaching them just as Martha had taught her. She took pride in providing good employment to women who wanted to support themselves. When Victor turned 18, Vincent made him a partner in the business. The store was renamed Quinn and Son General Store, and Victor brought new ideas and energy to the operation. He wanted to expand into mail order business, sending goods to the more remote ranches and homesteads by catalog. Grace thought it was a brilliant idea and helped him develop the system. Margaret, at 16, announced that she wanted to be a teacher. Grace arranged for her to apprentice with the schoolteacher, and she showed real talent for it. William, at 14, was still trying to figure out what he wanted to do with his life, but he was good with his hands and liked working with the horses, so Vincent was teaching him about ranching and animal husbandry. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Grace and Vincent threw a big party. It seemed like the whole town turned out to celebrate with them. There was food and music and dancing, just like at their wedding. Their children helped organize everything, and Grace felt overwhelmed with love and gratitude for the life they had built. As she danced with Vincent, both of them older and grayer but still deeply in love, Grace thought about that young woman who had stepped off the train in Kansas City so many years ago. That woman had been so certain she knew what she wanted, so sure that her path was set. She could never have imagined this life, this love, this sense of belonging. "What are you thinking about?" Vincent asked, reading her expression. "I am thinking about how one decision can change everything, how saying yes to one sunset led to all of this. No regrets, not a single one. This life has been everything I never knew I wanted, and it is all because I was brave enough to take a chance on a cowboy who promised to show me something beautiful. You made your own bravery, Grace. I just provided the opportunity." Years later, as Grace sat on the porch of their house watching the sun set over the prairie, she reflected on the long journey of her life. She was 62 years old now, a grandmother several times over. Victor had taken over the store completely and was doing a wonderful job. He had married a nice woman from a nearby town, and they had given Grace and Vincent 3 grandchildren so far. Margaret had become a beloved teacher in Dodge City, educating a generation of children. She had married a banker who appreciated her intelligence and her passion for learning, and they had 2 children of their own. William had surprised everyone by becoming a rancher after all. He had saved his money and bought land outside town, and he was making a good living raising cattle. He had married a rancher's daughter who was as wild and free-spirited as he was, and they had 4 rowdy boys who kept everyone entertained. Vincent came out onto the porch and sat beside Grace, taking her hand. His hair was white now, and there were deep lines around his eyes, but he was still the man she had fallen in love with all those years ago. Still steady and strong, still kind and good. "Beautiful evening," he said. "They all are," Grace replied. "I never get tired of watching the sunset from our porch. Remember when I first brought you out to see the prairie sunset? You were so skeptical about everything, so determined to leave and go back to the city. I was a fool. I almost missed out on the best thing that ever happened to me." "You were not a fool. You were careful. You were protecting yourself. I understood that. Grace squeezed his hand. You understood me even when I did not understand myself. You saw who I could be, what kind of life I could have here, and you were patient enough to let me figure it out on my own. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn colors. This was their routine now, these quiet evenings together. Their children and grandchildren visited often, filling the house with noise and energy. But these peaceful moments, just the two of them, were precious. I love you, Grace. Just as much today as I did the day I married you. More, even. I love you too, Vincent. Thank you for giving me this life, this family, this home. We gave it to each other, Vincent said. That is what marriage is, building something together brick by brick, day by day. As the sun sank below the horizon and the first stars appeared, Grace felt at peace. Her life had not turned out the way she had planned all those years ago. It had turned out so much better. She had found love and purpose and belonging in the last place she expected. And it had all started with one sunset, one decision, one leap of faith. The prairie stretched out before them, vast and beautiful and full of memories. Grace thought about her uncle and how he had loved this place, how he had built something meaningful here. She had honored his legacy, not just by keeping the store running, but by embracing the life he had chosen, the possibilities the West had offered. She thought about that young woman on the train platform, so sure of herself and her plans. She wished she could tell that woman not to be so rigid, so certain, to be open to unexpected possibilities, to trust that sometimes the best things come from taking chances. But that woman had found her way eventually. She had been brave enough to stay for one sunset, and that had made all the difference. As darkness fell and Vincent helped her inside, Grace took one last look at the prairie she had come to love so deeply. Tomorrow would bring more work and family and the ongoing business of life. But tonight, she was simply grateful. Grateful for every sunrise and sunset, for every day with Vincent, for every moment of this unexpected, extraordinary life. Their story was not one of adventure and drama, not the kind told in dime novels about the Wild West. It was quieter than that, more personal. It was a story about love and choice, about finding home in an unexpected place, about building a life that mattered. And it had all started with a cowboy and a city girl and one perfect sunset on the Kansas prairie.